Welcome to Speaking in Your Basement. Let's start with a Stephen Covey quote. If I were to summarize the most important principle I've learned in interpersonal relations in a single sentence, it would be this: seek first to understand, then to be understood. I think I mostly got it right. But that's the fifth principle, or the fifth habit from the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. Sometimes when people have tried to get, corner Covey, so to speak, and say, what's the most important habit? He's answered with that. The fifth one: seek first to understand, then to be understood. This is the broad-based skill of listening. And he says several times in the book, don't prescribe without diagnosing. You got to diagnose first. You've got to pay attention. You've got to pay attention. You've got to understand before you can go out and assume you know how to fix the problem and make the situation better. Mostly we don't do that. And it's very instinctive, particularly with other people. I mean, just with situations in life, oftentimes we don't spend enough time just looking to see if we can figure out the situation. We're trying to be fast. We're trying to get to the next thing. We're trying to take the steps to resolve it right away. And there might be instances where that's appropriate. If you've got tons of experience in the area, then your instincts might be pretty good. You might go right into what will actually be a resolution. But for most of us, most of the time, we have to pay attention first. We have to listen first. We have to put aside the idea that we might have it figured out, or we might know just what to do, or we got to figure out something. You got to pay attention first. You can figure out something next, but first you pay attention. First you get the information. First you try to see and hear as clearly as you can what's happening, what the situation is. Then you can go from there. I notice this with people all the time. There's such an instinct to just say something back, to respond, to have the next thing, to move to the next step, whatever that is. And unfortunately, I've done this with my daughters a lot. I've worked to try to listen to them with more than I have with anybody else ever. And I still screw it up quite frequently. I still find myself giving advice or coming back with, oh, that's not how you should feel. How you should feel is this, or, well, here's my experience on it. And it's not that all that's not useful in some sense, or at least could be useful. Most people aren't going to find it useful until they feel understood. And there's a certain appropriateness to that. The situation is not understood. It can't be properly resolved. So you can start practicing this with anything. And a lot of people have that instant respond because that's how we grew up. We grew up with a response. The response could be ignoring it. The response could be get over it. The response could be, oh, well, I've got the right advice to resolve that situation. It could be any number of things. But most of us got something like that in our early communications. And so it's very difficult for us to listen, partially because we were never really listened to. Not by other people. And you've got to learn to manage your expectations of other people, or at least that's been my experience. But when you start to listen, there's a power that develops with that. When you start to listen to yourself, and listen to yourself as if you don't know. You might assume you know, and who knows, maybe you do. But if you do know, it's not going to hurt to listen again. At bare minimum, it's going to reinforce what you already know. More likely, you're going to get a clearer image, a clearer idea, because you've paid a little more attention. And in some cases, you might realize you were going in completely the wrong direction. You just listen. You just pay attention. And you can do this by just thinking through something and writing it out, or speaking about it out loud. Or you can ask questions. Find the kind of questions you might ask for anybody, and you're trying to understand where someone's coming from. You can look up lists of these online. But questions to get to the root of what's upsetting you, or upsetting anyone. And you can just kind of go through the list and ask yourself that. What's really upsetting you? How do you feel about that? And just listen. And try to state it and see if the statement feels correct. You're feeling very frustrated about that. Say it out loud. You can do the same things that you would use with other people with yourself. Try to get to the core of the feeling and be honest with yourself. Now, as I've told you with many things, it's best to do this on your own in private, because if anybody sees you, they'll think you're crazy. But when you start to give yourself that feeling of being listened to, that feeling of acceptance, that feeling of welcoming, that feeling of honest openness, like we're really trying to understand this and we're really trying to make this better, not we're just going to pop out with the first thing that comes to mind and move on. There's a certain satisfaction and connection that goes with that. And when you start to experience that, just by yourself, when you start to experience that on your own, you can develop a little momentum. And that ability to pay attention gradually transfers to a variety of things. It can transfer to a variety of situations in your life and gradually to the other people you interact with in life. Now, as quickly as you can, you want to improve relationships, I encourage you to listen as best you can. That will help. But you've really got to start with you. You're trying to do all this listening and consideration and really paying attention with other people. Not only is it going to be more difficult, it's also going to feel a little bit empty if you don't feel like you're getting that. It'd be great if there's someone out there that's going to like swing in and save the day and really start listening to you. But it's probably going to have to be you first. For most of the things you want in life, you're probably going to have to take the first step. If you have anything that just shows up out of the blue, that's great. I'm happy for you. But I wouldn't wait for it. I'd get started. Listen. Pay attention. You can do a little more paying attention, a little more listening in every situation in life. And one of the most important to do it with is with you. What's going well? What's not going so well? What are you pretty happy with? What are you still frustrated with? And once you respect that, once you understand the feeling, once you understand the frustration, once you've accepted it, once you've told yourself it's okay, pretty much anybody would feel frustrated if this happened to them. So you're frustrated, that's all right. Once you've been with it for a moment, so what are we going to do next? Where are we going to go from here? That is the next step, but it's not the first step. Make sure you take the first step first. Pay attention. Listen. Diagnose. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. I'm Ben Langley. Thanks very much for spending a little time with me today. We'll talk again soon.